Chosen one, listen carefully. I have an urgent and important message to release today, and this message is not for everyone. This is only for those who walk the divine path of God, those who have been marked, separated, and called for a higher purpose. If you are not serious about God, if you are not walking in truth, obedience, and spiritual alignment, this message will not hold you. You would have already clicked away, but the fact that you are here tells me something powerful. Heaven allowed this message to reach you at exactly the right time, not early, not late, perfectly timed. Chosen one, your frequency has shifted. Your spirit has risen beyond survival mode. You have entered a higher level of awareness, what many would call the fifth dimension, where truth becomes clear and peace becomes natural. This is not imagination. This is confirmation. What I am about to share will explain what has been happening within you, why your life feels different now, and what God is preparing you for next. Stay with me till the very end, because the final revelation will settle your spirit and strengthen your calling. Before we continue, chosen ones, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon, and share this message with other chosen ones so they don't miss their confirmation. And comment 777 in the comments to declare that you are aligned, elevated, and ready for what God is doing in this season.
Understanding frequency through God's design. Chosen one, let me slow this down and speak to you with clarity, not confusion. When we talk about frequency, we are not talking about something mystical, strange, or outside of God. Frequency is simply alignment. It is the condition of your spirit in relation to God's truth. From the very beginning, God designed everything to operate in order, rhythm, and harmony. Creation itself moves by divine patterns. Light has frequency, sound has frequency, even the human heart responds to rhythm. So when we speak of spiritual frequency, we are speaking about how closely your inner life is tuned to God's presence, His voice, and His will. Many people misunderstand this because the world has distorted spiritual language. But frequency is not about escaping reality. It is about seeing reality clearly. When your frequency is low, you live in constant reaction. Fear controls you. Anger drains you. Confusion clouds your judgment. You feel restless even when nothing is wrong. That is not because you are weak. It is because your spirit is operating far from its original design. Sin, trauma, disobedience, and prolonged stress all pull the soul downward. They dull spiritual sensitivity. They keep a person stuck in survival mode. But when God begins to work on a chosen one, the first thing He restores is alignment. He doesn't rush you into platforms or blessings. He corrects your inner posture. As you begin to pray differently, think differently, and obey even when it's uncomfortable, something shifts inside you. You become less reactive, less desperate, less driven by emotion. That is frequency rising, not excitement, not hype, stability, peace, clarity. Jesus Himself demonstrated this. He was never hurried, never anxious, never controlled by crowds or threats. He moved with authority because He was fully aligned with the Father. That alignment was His frequency. He could walk into chaos and bring order without force. That same principle applies to you. The more you walk in truth, humility, repentance, and discipline, the higher your spiritual frequency becomes. Understand this clearly. Frequency is not raised by words alone. It is raised by lifestyle, by what you allow into your mind, by what you tolerate in your heart, by how quickly you forgive, by how honestly you obey. A chosen one begins to notice that certain conversations feel heavy, certain environments feel loud, certain entertainments feel empty. That is not pride. That is discernment awakening. Your spirit is rejecting what no longer matches its alignment. God designed your spirit to respond to Him naturally. That is why when you sit quietly in His presence, you feel relief instead of boredom. That is why prayer calms you instead of exhausting you. That is why silence feels safe now. Your frequency is remembering where it belongs. You are no longer fighting for peace. You are returning to it. This is also why chosen ones often feel misunderstood. When your frequency changes, your priorities change. You stop needing validation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop arguing with people who cannot hear you, not because you are better, but because you are clearer. You have learned that not everyone can meet you where God has taken you, and that is okay. Here is something important you need to hear. A higher frequency does not mean a perfect life. It means a grounded one. You still face challenges, you still feel emotions, but those emotions no longer control your decisions. You observe instead of react. You pray instead of panic. You wait instead of rush. That is maturity. That is spiritual authority forming. God's design was never for you to live in constant noise. The world thrives on distraction. God works in stillness. When your frequency rises, you naturally withdraw from chaos. Not because you hate people, but because you value your peace. You begin to guard your energy, your thoughts, and your time. This is not selfish. This is stewardship. God cannot pour clarity into a cluttered vessel. Chosen one, this shift you feel is not accidental. God has been refining your inner life quietly, removing layers, exposing false beliefs, teaching you to listen more than speak. That process raises your frequency because it aligns you with truth. Lies scatter the soul. Truth centers it. You may have noticed that you no longer resonate with drama, gossip, or emotional games. You see through manipulation quickly now. You sense when something is off, even if it looks good on the surface. That is discernment sharpening. That is your spirit becoming sensitive to God's signal instead of the world's noise. Do not be afraid of this change. You are not losing yourself. You are becoming yourself. The version God designed before the world tried to shape you. Higher frequency does not separate you from humanity. It prepares you to serve it wisely. You cannot heal from the same level that wounded you. God lifts you so you can see clearly. Rest in this truth. You are not confused. You are aligning. You are not distant. You are discerning. You are not empty. You are being filled differently now. And as your frequency continues to rise through obedience, humility, and faith, peace will become your normal state, not a temporary feeling. This is God's design, and you are right on time. What the fifth dimension really means for a chosen one. Chosen one, listen closely as I speak with calm authority today. The fifth dimension is not a distant place or mystical escape. It is a state of spiritual awareness where your inner life finally governs your outer world. You are still living on earth, still working, loving, and serving, yet something inside you has shifted permanently. You are no longer controlled by appearances, emotions, or fear. You are guided by discernment, peace, and truth. This is not imagination or pride. This is maturity of spirit, shaped quietly by God through obedience, surrender, and time patiently forming within you alone, now. For a chosen one, the fifth dimension means you walk by faith rather than sight. You interpret life spiritually before reacting emotionally. Circumstances no longer define your identity or direction. Delays stop feeling like punishment and start revealing preparation. Closed doors stop hurting as deeply because you trust God's timing more than your expectations. You understand that life is shaping you, not attacking you. This awareness brings steadiness. You stop rushing, forcing, and explaining. You begin listening, waiting, and discerning God's movement with patience and confidence before greater responsibility arrives. In this dimension, your mind becomes quieter even when life remains demanding. Fear loses authority over your decisions. Panic no longer drives your choices. You pause before reacting. You pray before responding. You reflect instead of exploding. This calm is not weakness. It is strength refined by trust in God. You realize that urgency often comes from insecurity, not wisdom. As peace settles deeper, your thoughts align, your body relaxes, and your spirit feels anchored regardless of external pressure. Stability becomes natural, and discernment sharpens with consistent obedience daily to God through disciplined faith and humility within every season experienced. Emotional regulation is a clear sign you have entered this level. You still feel deeply, but feelings no longer rule you. Sadness visits without consuming you. Anger appears without controlling you. Joy flows without making you careless. Emotions become information rather than commands. This is why others sense you have changed. They remember the reactive version of you. They are now meeting the grounded version shaped by restraint, prayer, and self-awareness rooted in spiritual discipline. This maturity protects your peace and honors God consistently daily without requiring constant validation from external sources or emotional approval cycles that drained you. Another change you notice is selectiveness without coldness. You stop explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. You release the need to be validated. Silence becomes comfortable. Boundaries become firm. You learn that peace is more valuable than being liked. Truth does not require defense when it is lived consistently. This level teaches you when to speak and when to remain quiet, trusting that God defends alignment better than argument ever could. This wisdom preserves energy and prevents unnecessary spiritual conflict while strengthening your authority through calm obedience and consistent submission to divine timing alone without internal resistance remaining. Your relationship with God deepens significantly in this dimension. Prayer becomes communion rather than performance. You stop striving to impress heaven. You begin resting in God's presence naturally. Sometimes words fade and silence speaks louder. That silence feels safe, not empty. You are learning to be with God, not just work for Him. This intimacy stabilizes your faith and strengthens trust, even when answers do not arrive immediately. Confidence grows quietly as dependence replaces anxiety and striving within your spirit over time through faithful surrender and patient obedience during unseen seasons of preparation that God values deeply for your growth. Discernment becomes sharper at this level of awareness. You sense atmospheres quickly. You recognize motives without accusation. You perceive truth beneath words. This does not make you judgmental. It makes you wise. You understand when to engage and when to withdraw. Silence becomes protection rather than avoidance. You no longer feel obligated to correct everything. You trust God to reveal truth in His timing, not yours. This restraint preserves relationships and prevents unnecessary spiritual battles while allowing peace to remain your guiding authority always, even when others misunderstand your quiet confidence and interpret restraint as weakness incorrectly from limited perspective. Detachment from outcomes is another sign of this dimension. You still care deeply, yet you no longer cling desperately. You do your part faithfully and release control peacefully. You trust God with results instead of forcing doors. You understand that forced opportunities bring unnecessary warfare. Waiting no longer feels passive, it feels powerful. You are anchored in obedience, not anxiety, confident that alignment produces results without manipulation or fear. This trust stabilizes your emotions and strengthens spiritual maturity greatly, allowing God to move freely without interference from impatience, insecurity, or fear-based reactions that once disrupted your peace and clarity. Compassion matures differently at this level. You love without rescuing. You help without self-betrayal. You pray without carrying guilt. You understand that everyone has their own timing with God. You stop trying to awaken those unwilling to grow. This wisdom protects your energy. You support others while honoring your limits. Love becomes cleaner, stronger, and free from emotional obligation or control. Boundaries no longer feel harsh but necessary for spiritual health, allowing compassion to flow without depletion or resentment as wisdom guides your responses instead of emotion and preserves peace within every relationship you are assigned to steward faithfully. Your tolerance for chaos decreases noticeably in this dimension. Loud conflict drains you quickly. Repetitive negativity exhausts your spirit. Shallow activity feels heavy. This is not boredom, it is refinement. Your spirit now prefers depth, truth, and substance. You crave meaning over stimulation. You choose environments that nourish peace. This shift protects your alignment and keeps your inner life uncluttered and receptive. You become intentional about where you invest attention and time because awareness has taught you energy is sacred and distractions quietly erode spiritual clarity when left unchecked for extended periods within your evolving spiritual life with God alone. Suffering is also viewed differently from this level. You no longer glorify pain or fear it. You recognize pressure as a teacher rather than an enemy. Trials refine discernment and strengthen faith. You stop asking for easier paths. You ask for stronger alignment. Growth becomes quiet, steady, and purposeful. You trust God's process even when progress feels slow or invisible. This mindset prevents despair and keeps hope grounded firmly during seasons where outward evidence remains minimal and faith must operate without constant reassurance from circumstances, people, or visible outcomes that once defined your expectations instead of God's promises and truth. Spiritual authority expresses itself differently here. You stop announcing who you are. You stop proving your calling. Your calm becomes your testimony. Your consistency becomes your witness. People feel your presence without explanation. Authority flows from alignment, not position. You influence environments quietly. Your stability shifts atmospheres more than arguments ever could. This silent strength reflects deep trust in God's governance and confidence rooted in obedience rather than ego, allowing humility to coexist with unshakable inner authority that remains steady through pressure, misunderstanding, and delay without emotional collapse or spiritual compromise during critical moments of testing assigned by God alone. This dimension does not isolate you from people. It teaches healthy engagement. You stop dragging others into growth they resist. You lead by example rather than force. You respect timing, both yours and theirs. You plant seeds and trust God for increase. This releases pressure from your soul. Responsibility replaces urgency. Faith replaces control. You finally accept that transformation cannot be rushed, and patience becomes a spiritual discipline you honor without frustration, resentment, or the need to interfere in processes God is intentionally overseeing for long-term fruit and maturity that will bless others later according to divine wisdom alone. Chosen one, this is what the fifth dimension truly means for you. It is not escape. It is embodiment. You are living from the inside outward. Peace leads you. Truth anchors you. God guides you. Once your spirit reaches this level of alignment, there is no desire to return to confusion. Only a deeper commitment to obedience, faith, and remaining centered in God's presence daily. This alignment becomes your foundation, direction, and lasting strength as you continue walking faithfully without fear or hesitation, knowing God sustains what He elevates in perfect timing beyond human understanding and constant reassurance from heaven. Signs your frequency has shifted beyond the old world. Chosen one, when your frequency shifts beyond the old world, the change is not loud, dramatic, or announced. It is quiet, internal, and undeniable. You do not wake up one day feeling superior. You wake up feeling different. Things that once mattered deeply no longer hold the same weight. Situations that once triggered emotional storms now pass through you with far less resistance. This is not because you stopped caring. It is because your spirit has matured and moved beyond survival-based living into discernment-based living guided by God. One of the earliest signs is a sudden loss of interest in what once entertained you. Conversations that revolve around gossip, complaints, or shallow validation begin to feel heavy. You may still love people, but you no longer enjoy certain interactions. Your spirit feels drained rather than energized. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. Your inner world has changed, so external stimulation no longer satisfies you the same way. Another clear sign is emotional detachment without bitterness. You notice that you can let go without hatred. You can walk away without resentment. You no longer need closure from everyone. You no longer chase apologies that never come. This does not mean you lack emotion. It means you have learned to protect your peace. You understand that not every ending requires explanation. Some endings simply require acceptance. Your tolerance for dysfunction decreases sharply. What you once tolerated out of fear, loyalty, or habit now feels unbearable. You can no longer pretend that things are fine when they are not. Your spirit rejects compromise that contradicts truth. This may create distance between you and others, but it also creates clarity. God is teaching you discernment through discomfort. Another sign is heightened sensitivity to energy and atmosphere. You walk into a room and immediately sense tension, dishonesty, or heaviness. You may not be able to explain it logically, but your spirit recognizes it instantly. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is awareness. Your spirit is no longer numb. It is alert and responsive to God's signal. You may also notice that your desire for solitude has increased. This is not isolation driven by pain. It is solitude driven by clarity. You feel restored when you are alone with God. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels safe. You process better in stillness. You hear God more clearly when noise fades. This is a strong indicator that your frequency has shifted. Another sign is that your reactions have slowed. You no longer respond immediately to provocation. You pause. You observe. You pray internally before speaking. This restraint confuses people who were used to your emotional responses. They may think you are distant or cold. In reality, you are grounded. You are no longer emotionally accessible to chaos. Your standards begin to rise naturally, not from pride, but from clarity. You stop accepting inconsistent behavior. You stop making excuses for patterns that drain you. You become selective with your time, energy, and commitments. This is not selfishness. This is stewardship. You understand that God cannot pour clarity into a cluttered vessel. Another sign is a shift in how you experience conflict. You no longer seek to win arguments. You seek peace. You realize that being right does not always bring rest. You learn when to disengage. Silence becomes a tool, not a weakness. You trust that God defends truth better than confrontation ever could. Your relationship with fear changes dramatically. Fear may still appear, but it no longer controls you. You acknowledge it without obeying it. You move forward despite uncertainty. This courage is quiet, not loud. It is rooted in trust, not adrenaline. You have learned that God's presence matters more than predictable outcomes. You may notice that your dreams and inner impressions become more vivid. Insight comes suddenly. Understanding forms without effort. You connect dots that others miss. This is not imagination, it is discernment developing. God communicates with a willing, quiet mind more easily than with a restless one. Another sign is emotional fatigue after being around certain people. You feel drained without obvious reason. This is your spirit recognizing misalignment. You are not meant to carry every emotional burden. You are learning to step back without guilt. This protects your peace and preserves your assignment. Your attachment to validation decreases. Compliments feel nice but unnecessary. Criticism hurts less. You no longer shape yourself to fit expectations. You become comfortable being misunderstood. This freedom is a strong indicator of spiritual elevation. You know who you are without needing constant confirmation. Your compassion also changes. You care deeply, but you no longer overextend. You help without rescuing. You pray without absorbing guilt. You understand that God works with people directly. You stop trying to fix what only God can transform. This wisdom brings emotional balance. Another sign is your response to success and failure stabilizes. You do not rise too high with praise or fall too low with setbacks. You remain steady. This emotional consistency reflects spiritual maturity. Your identity is no longer attached to outcomes. It is anchored in obedience. You may feel periods of loneliness, but it feels different now. It is not desperation. It is depth. You miss connection, but you do not compromise alignment to escape discomfort. You trust that God will send aligned relationships in His timing. Your intuition becomes clearer. You sense when something is off, even if it looks good. You listen more than you speak. You observe patterns rather than isolated moments. This awareness protects you from unnecessary entanglements. Another sign is your patience increases. You stop rushing processes. You stop forcing results. You trust timing. Waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels purposeful. This patience reflects confidence in God's plan. You also notice a stronger pull toward truth. You seek understanding rather than opinion. You value wisdom over popularity. You crave depth in learning, faith, and conversation. Shallow explanations no longer satisfy you. Your boundaries become firmer. You say no without over-explaining. You leave situations without dramatic exits. You protect your peace calmly. This confidence signals that your spirit is secure. Another sign is reduced tolerance for hypocrisy, including your own. You desire integrity. You align actions with beliefs. You repent quickly. You correct yourself without defensiveness. This humility strengthens your spiritual foundation. You may notice increased clarity about your purpose. Not all details are revealed, but direction becomes clearer. You know what no longer fits. You sense what you are being prepared for. Your nervous system calms. Anxiety lessens. You breathe deeper. Your body responds to peace. This physical shift confirms internal alignment. Finally, you feel an unshakable sense of knowing. You cannot explain it fully, but you trust where God is leading you. Confusion fades. Fear weakens. Peace becomes familiar. Chosen one, these signs confirm that your frequency has shifted beyond the old world. You are not losing anything valuable. You are shedding what no longer aligns. This transition is sacred. Remain grounded. Stay obedient. Protect your peace. God does not elevate without purpose. Why God elevated you before others? Chosen one, this is a question that has quietly lived in your spirit, even if you have never spoken it aloud. Why you? Why now? Why did God begin working on you, separating you, refining you, and elevating your awareness before others around you were ready? Let me speak to you clearly, without ego and without apology. God does nothing randomly. Elevation is never favoritism. It is assignment. It is responsibility. And it always comes with weight. God elevates chosen ones early because He needs witnesses before He needs crowds. He needs vessels before movements. He needs foundations before structures. While others are still comfortable, distracted, or asleep spiritually, God awakens those He can trust to endure isolation, misunderstanding, and discipline. You were not chosen because you were better. You were chosen because you were willing to be corrected, willing to be stripped, willing to obey without applause. Elevation always begins in isolation. Before God ever sends someone publicly, He separates them privately. This separation is not punishment. It is preparation. When God elevates you before others, He is not rewarding you with comfort. He is training you with pressure. You learn to stand alone so you do not collapse when influence arrives. You learn silence so you do not misuse words later. You learn humility so pride does not destroy what God builds through you. God elevates early those who are meant to carry weight later. Influence without maturity becomes corruption. Visibility without grounding becomes destruction. God protects you by slowing others. While they enjoy temporary comfort, you are forged. While they blend in, you are refined. This process feels unfair until you realize it is mercy. God is saving you from shortcuts that destroy destinies. Another reason God elevates you before others is discernment. Some people cannot handle early awareness. It would inflate them, distract them, or harden them. God only gives deeper sight to those who will not misuse it. You were given clarity because God knew you would not weaponize it. You would not exploit it. You would not look down on others. You would carry it with humility even when it isolated you. Chosen one, elevation is not about knowing more, it is about surrendering more. God elevates those who are willing to let go. Let go of ego, let go of validation, let go of old identities. Let go of familiar environments. You lost things others still have because you are being prepared for what others cannot yet carry. This loss was not theft, it was refinement. God also elevates early because some assignments require long preparation. You are being trained for endurance, not momentary impact. What God plans to do through you will require emotional stability, spiritual discernment, and inner authority. These things cannot be rushed, so while others mature later, you mature earlier. This does not make you ahead. It makes you prepared. You may have noticed that your path has been heavier than others. You faced challenges earlier. You questioned deeper. You were forced to grow sooner. That was not cruelty. That was calibration. God was adjusting your internal structure early so you would not break later. Pressure now prevents collapse later. This is wisdom, not punishment. God elevates you before others because you are meant to help others later without becoming entangled in their chaos. You had to learn boundaries early. You had to learn restraint early. You had to learn how to love without rescuing. If you had grown at the same pace as everyone else, you would not be able to guide anyone safely. You would still be emotionally reactive. God spared you that. Another reason for early elevation is obedience. You obeyed when it was inconvenient. You listened when it was uncomfortable. You walked away when it hurt. Obedience accelerates alignment. God does not elevate potential, He elevates obedience. Every time you chose truth over comfort, your spiritual authority increased quietly. Heaven noticed what people ignored. Chosen one, God also elevates early to protect the mission. Some environments would have destroyed your sensitivity. Some relationships would have hardened your heart. Some habits would have diluted your calling. God removed you before damage could occur. What felt like loss was actually preservation. God shielded you from becoming someone you were never meant to be. Elevation before others often brings loneliness, and that loneliness serves a purpose. It teaches you how to rely on God without substitutes. It removes dependency on people. It forces you to develop inner strength. If God surrounded you with constant affirmation, you would never build spiritual resilience. Silence trains your faith to stand without reassurance. God elevates you early because you are meant to see patterns others cannot yet see. You are meant to recognize cycles, motives, and spiritual undercurrents. This awareness allows you to navigate wisely and later guide others gently. But this sight comes at a cost. You cannot unsee what you see. That is why God only gives it to those who can carry it responsibly. You may struggle with guilt about being different. You may wonder why you cannot go back to simpler versions of life. Understand this clearly. You cannot return to where God has already outgrown you. Elevation is irreversible. Awareness cannot be undone. God moves forward, not backward. God elevates early because He needs anchors in unstable times. As chaos increases, grounded people become essential. Your stability will calm others. Your clarity will guide others. Your peace will remind others that God is still present. You are being positioned as a steady presence, not a loud voice. This elevation also teaches you patience. You learn to wait without bitterness. You learn to trust timing. You learn that God's delays are strategic. While others rush ahead, you are trained to move only when sent. This discipline will protect you later when opportunities tempt you to move outside alignment. Another reason God elevated you before others is humility through suffering. You were humbled early so pride would not overtake you later. You know what it feels like to be misunderstood, overlooked, and alone. This experience softens your heart. It prevents superiority. It creates compassion. Leaders without suffering lack empathy. God spared you that emptiness. Chosen one, you are not elevated to be admired. You are elevated to serve wisely. God trusts you with clarity because he knows you will not abuse it. He trusts you with solitude because he knows you will not resent him. He trusts you with silence because he knows you will listen. This early elevation also prepares you for resistance. When influence comes, opposition follows. God strengthens your inner life before exposing you externally. You learn to stand firm without becoming defensive. You learn to stay peaceful under pressure. These skills are developed quietly, not publicly. Understand this deeply. God elevates before others not to separate permanently, but to prepare temporarily. Those who are willing will eventually rise. Those who are called will eventually awaken. You are simply ahead in preparation, not superior in worth. Your elevation carries responsibility. You are held to a higher standard internally. You must guard your heart carefully. You must remain humble intentionally. You must stay obedient consistently. Elevation without discipline becomes downfall. God trusts you to stay aligned. Chosen one, stop questioning why your path looks different. Stop comparing timelines. Stop measuring progress against others. God is not running a race. He is building lives. Yours is being built carefully, intentionally, and thoroughly. You were elevated before others because God needed someone who could stand firm when others waver. Someone who could remain calm when others panic. Someone who could see clearly when others are confused. This is not a reward. It is a calling. Carry it with humility. Walk in obedience. Stay grounded in God. He elevates whom he prepares, and he prepared you early for a reason. Challenges of living in a higher frequency world. Chosen one, living in a higher frequency world is not as comfortable as many imagine. While peace increases within you, pressure often increases around you. You begin to notice that the more aligned you become, the more misaligned environments feel. This contrast creates tension. You see clearly, but others may not. You move slowly, while the world rushes. This gap can feel heavy. God never promised that elevation would be easy. He promised it would be purposeful. These challenges are not signs that something is wrong. They are confirmation that your spirit is no longer operating at the same level it once did. One of the first challenges is loneliness. Not isolation caused by rejection, but separation caused by growth. You may still be surrounded by people, yet feel unseen. Conversations feel shallow. Shared interests fade. This loneliness can be confusing because nothing dramatic caused it. You simply outgrew certain connections. God often removes noise before he reveals direction. This season teaches you how to rely on him without substitutes. Loneliness refines your faith, not to harm you, but to deepen your dependence on God's presence rather than human closeness for comfort. Another challenge is being misunderstood. When your frequency rises, your responses change. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop engaging in drama. Others may interpret this as arrogance, distance, or indifference. You may feel pressure to explain yourself, to prove you still care. But clarity does not require explanation. God often allows misunderstanding to test whether you will remain authentic or shrink to be accepted. This challenge strengthens your confidence and teaches you that obedience matters more than approval, even when misinterpretation feels uncomfortable or unfair. Living at a higher frequency also brings increased spiritual resistance. The more aligned you become, the more opposition you may sense internally or externally. Old temptations resurface, doubt whispers quietly, fatigue appears unexpectedly. This is not coincidence. Growth threatens stagnation. Resistance is not punishment. It is evidence that transformation is occurring. God allows resistance to strengthen discernment. You learn to identify what drains you and what nourishes you. Spiritual Spiritual endurance is built through pressure, not ease, and God is developing resilience within you deliberately. Another challenge is emotional fatigue. Higher awareness means you perceive more. You notice subtle shifts, hidden motives, and unspoken tension. This constant awareness can be tiring if not managed properly. You may feel drained after interactions without knowing why. This is why rest becomes essential. God teaches you to withdraw regularly, not to escape people, but to restore your spirit. Learning when to disengage is part of maturity. You are not meant to carry everything you perceive. Discernment without boundaries leads to exhaustion. You may also struggle with the temptation to return to old patterns for comfort. Familiar environments, even unhealthy ones, can feel appealing when growth feels heavy. The mind craves familiarity, but your spirit knows better. This internal conflict can be challenging. You may question whether the old world was easier. It was simpler, but it was limiting. God reminds you that comfort and calling rarely coexist. Choosing growth often means choosing discomfort temporarily. This challenge strengthens your commitment to alignment over familiarity. Another difficulty is patience. At a higher frequency, you become aware of timing. You see potential, yet must wait. You understand direction, yet movement feels slow. Waiting can feel frustrating, especially when clarity is present. God uses waiting to refine motives. He ensures that desire does not outrun discipline. This challenge teaches you to trust process over impulse. Waiting develops humility and dependence. It prevents premature action that could damage long-term purpose. Patience becomes a spiritual muscle strengthened through intentional restraint. Living at a higher frequency can also strain relationships. Boundaries become necessary, and not everyone accepts them. Saying no may bring disappointment. Withdrawing may bring criticism. You may feel guilt for choosing peace over people-pleasing. God teaches you that boundaries are not rejection. They are protection. This challenge forces you to redefine love. Love does not mean constant availability. It means honesty, wisdom, and self-respect. Healthy boundaries preserve relationships by preventing resentment and emotional burnout over time. Another challenge is maintaining humility. As clarity increases, it can be tempting to feel superior. God guards against this by reminding you of your own past struggles. He allows moments of weakness to keep you grounded. True elevation carries humility, not ego. This challenge ensures that awareness does not become arrogance. God disciplines those he trusts. He keeps your heart soft so your authority remains clean. Humility protects you from isolation caused by pride and keeps you teachable in every season. You may also face the challenge of silence from God. Higher frequency does not mean constant revelation. Sometimes God grows quiet. This silence can feel unsettling, but silence is not absence. It is invitation. God teaches you to trust without constant reassurance. This challenge deepens faith. You learn to stand firm even when guidance feels subtle. Silence strengthens discernment. It trains you to listen internally rather than rely on external confirmation for every step. Another challenge is resisting the urge to control outcomes. With clarity comes awareness of possibilities. You may see where things are heading and want to intervene. God teaches restraint. Control disrupts trust. This challenge refines surrender. You learn to do your part and release the rest. Trusting God with outcomes preserves peace. It prevents anxiety from taking root. Surrender becomes an active choice rather than passive resignation as faith matures through disciplined obedience. Living in a higher frequency world also requires emotional honesty. You can no longer suppress feelings without consequence. Ignored emotions surface quickly. God invites you to process, not avoid. This challenge teaches emotional maturity. You learn to feel without being ruled. You acknowledge emotions without acting impulsively. This honesty strengthens self-awareness and prevents internal conflict. Healing accelerates when emotions are faced with God rather than hidden behind productivity or distraction. Finally, the greatest challenge is consistency. Alignment must be maintained daily. Higher frequency is not a destination, it is a discipline. You must guard your thoughts, energy, and habits intentionally. Neglect leads to drift. God teaches you that maintenance is as important as elevation. This challenge keeps you vigilant. Consistency builds longevity. It ensures that what God has developed within you remains stable and sustainable over time. Chosen one, these challenges are not obstacles, they are training. Living in a higher frequency world requires strength, humility, and trust. God does not elevate without equipping. Every challenge you face is shaping you to carry what is coming without collapse. Stay grounded, stay obedient. Peace will remain your anchor. How to sustain and protect your fifth dimensional alignment. Chosen one, reaching a higher level of spiritual alignment is powerful, but sustaining it requires discipline, awareness, and humility. God does not elevate you so you can relax spiritually. He elevates you so you can steward what He has entrusted to you. Alignment is not self-maintaining. It must be protected intentionally. Without care, even the most awakened spirit can drift back into confusion. What you guard determines what you keep. What you neglect determines what you lose. The first and most important way to sustain your alignment is through guarding your inner life. Your thoughts, emotions, and intentions must be monitored daily. You cannot allow negative patterns to live rent-free in your mind. Fear, comparison, resentment,